We're in lesson number 9 today. Pharaoh promotes Joseph. Genesis 41, 37 through 57. Before we get started, we're going to have a prayer and consider Pat's family. It says Levi had successful surgery. That's good. Stella's family, Melissa Poole, Jean, Betty, Larry, Susan. Sounds like they found some information on Susan. And others on our list here. Jack, shout out to those that are viewing us from home. So let's open up with a word of prayer. Heavenly Father, we're so thankful for this morning that we can gather together, consider another portion of your word, thanking you for all the blessings that we've arrived here again today safely, that the weather has been cooperating, that we are able to gather, that the sickness, we seem to have some cures coming up. We praise you for that, and for all the other blessings that you've given us in this life. We ask you now to consider those that are sick, ailing, those that are grieving, and those that need your general comfort. We all ask all these things in the name of Jesus Christ. Amen. Okay, so we're in lesson number 9. And as we always do, we're going to begin with some reading, beginning in Genesis 41:37. Jean?
Potiphar promotes Joseph. So the advice was good in the eyes of Pharaoh and the eyes of all his servants. And Pharaoh said to his servants, "Can we find such a one of these men who is the Spirit of God?" Then Pharaoh said to Joseph, "Inasmuch as God has shown you all this, there is no one discerning and wise as you. You shall be over my house, and all my people shall be ruled according to your word. Only in your garden throne, which will be greater than you." And Pharaoh said to Joseph, "See, I have set you over all the land of Egypt." Then Pharaoh took his signature ring off his hand and put it on Joseph's hand, and he clothed him in garments of fine linen and put a gold chain around his neck. And he had him ride in the second chariot which he had, and they cried out before him, "Bow the knee." So he went down over all Egypt. Pharaoh also said to Joseph, "I am Pharaoh. Without you consent, no man may lift his hand or foot in all the land of Egypt."
Pharaoh called Joseph's name. And he gave him a wife, Abigail, daughter of Potiphar, Pharaoh. So Joseph went out over all the land of Egypt. Joseph was 30 years old when he stood before Pharaoh, king of Egypt. And Joseph went out from the presence of Pharaoh and went throughout all the land of Egypt. Now in the 700 years, the ground brought forth abundance. So he gathered up all food for the 7 years, which were in the land of Egypt, laid up food in the cities. He laid up every city, the food of the field which surrounded it. Joseph gathered very much grain, as the sand of the sea. Joseph born 2 sons before the years of famine came. Mazah, the daughter of Potiphar, priest of On, born to them. Joseph called the name of the firstborn Manasseh, for God has made me forget all my toil and all my father's house. The name of the second he called Ephraim, for God has caused me to be fruitful in the land of my affliction. In the 7 years of plenty, which were in the land of Egypt,
came to Joseph in Egypt to buy grain, because the famine was severe in all lands.
All right, thank you very much. Just backing up here, we're in lesson number 9, where Pharaoh promotes Joseph. And we know that Pharaoh promotes Joseph in this story because Joseph is still a dreamer. Anybody else a dreamer in the audience today? So I told you, I'm often called to interpret dreams in my house. My wife tells me her dreams all the time. I can't hardly remember mine. But here Joseph really is not dreaming. He's interpreting other dreams. And so we're going to look at that today. We're also going to notice where he gives the glory, which would be very easy for him to take credit for these things. So one lesson, of course, is a lesson here on humility, understanding where all our gifts come from. I bring up this map again to remind us of where we were. We're still in the area of Shechem. That's going to come up in the second hour, too. We're going to talk about this area. But Joseph was here looking after his brothers when they threw him into a pit. And then he was taken by a band on down to Egypt, and he arose to greatness in the Potiphar's house. And then that didn't work out. He was thrown in prison again. And that's where we find Joseph today in our reading, is that he's getting out of there, out of the prison. Again, good morning to all those watching at home. Appreciate your attendance. Remind you where we're at. We're still looking into Jacob and his descendants, and these will make up the 12 tribes of Israel. And we see here Joseph is displayed as with the coat of many colors. And to remind us again that Genesis now really, as we go out through these lessons, is all about Joseph. Joseph is a foreshadowing, as the Bible does, foreshadows in all the Old Testament, a foreshadowing of Jesus. So we're going to see many applications here where Joseph is our future Jesus. He's literally going to save the 12 tribes from starvation, from famine. He is not going to hold a grudge like many of us would under the circumstances. There are those around him that still do not appreciate what he's done for them. We're going to look at the baker today and the other servant there. So a lot to consider, but it's a pretty straightforward lesson. In Genesis 39:20 and Genesis 42, Joseph's master took him and put him into prison, a place where the king's prisoners were bound, and he was put there in prison. So that's where we were last week. Why was he put in prison? Does there anybody remember? He rejected Potiphar's wife. That's a very good way of putting it. And she made up a story about him. Again, these all, remember, Jacob here is the deceiver, one of the terms for him, a euphemism maybe. His literal name, as we remind ourselves again, is heel catcher, the supplanter. I remember a few weeks ago we talked about Jesus as our supplanter. And but the tricks keep coming back onto him. Jacob is told that Joseph is no longer, and that the only true descendant now he has is Benjamin. What what happened to Rachel when she was giving birth to Benjamin? She died. So Jacob runs into a lot of trouble here himself. But Joseph has been put into prison. And so that, it doesn't say how long he's in prison, but Tommy says it was around 2 years. Certainly there was a couple years between the baker being released and before, the baker remembers, was it the baker? Who remembers what Joseph had done? Huh? The butler. The baker is put to death, yeah. That's why I've got it in my mind. He tells the baker his demise is coming. We're going to talk about that too. Why was the baker put to death? Maybe an idea. But there was a distance of 2 years then, but I don't know between that point in time, how long he was there before he interprets these dreams either. Good question. Pharaoh was wroth against or mad with two officers, the butler and the baker, were the chief of these. So they were thrown into jail also. And we know from the background of this story, as we look ahead a little bit, Joseph also gained stature in prison. Now, why is that? Why does he gain stature while he's in prison with the head of the prison in there? This individual notices his character, the way he conducts himself, which again is another application for us. And they come to him and they said, "We have dreamed a dream. There's no interpreter." Now, who interpreted dreams in those days? Their gods, their magicians, their soothsayers would tell them. And we see this story with Pharaoh's coming up in the future. There's dreams, and they ask apparently in this prison there wasn't any of those, so they turned to Joseph. And as we see in the story, cutting through some of the scripture here that we just read, he interprets these dreams. And the 3 branches represent 3 days. Is there anywhere else in the Bible where we see this kind of symbology unveiled? The book of Revelation, right? We all struggle to interpret what all that means. And so here again, this is another example where we have dreams, we have interpretations, we have branches that represent days. And he says, "Within 3 days shall Pharaoh lift up thy head and restore thee into thy place." He's saying this is the butler. "And thou shalt deliver Pharaoh's cup into his hand," as it says here, "in the former manner was the butler." And he says, "And think of me well, show kindness, I pray thee, and make mention of me unto Pharaoh, and bring me out of this house," which is the prison. And what's the butler do? He forgets. Our producer said he forgets, our director. Instead of showing some appreciation, is there an application there too for us? Of course. And oftentimes we're raised right. We're told to say please and thank you, to appreciate good things that happen to us. But yet we'll hold a door for somebody and they'll just walk right through, not say a word. Little things that happen to us all the time. And more likely, we can be guilty of it too. But we see that, of course, the chief butler does forget him. So in Genesis chapter 40, verse 8, we see this dream. And as in Daniel's time also, pagans, these kind of people relied on their gods to interpret dreams. Oftentimes no one could answer them. And so here's a second case where I don't know if they had some kind of connection to their gods in jail, their idols. But Joseph, who's already second command, they come to him. And he interprets these dreams. Yet they don't, at least in the case of the butler, don't appreciate what's going on. Pharaoh has a dream. Behold, there came up out of the river 7 well-favored kine and fat-fleshed, and they were fed in the meadow. And behold, 7 of the other kine came up after them out of the river, ill-favored, lean-fleshed, and stood by the other kine upon the brink of the river. And the ill-favored and lean-fleshed kine did eat up the 7 well-favored and fat kine. And then, so Pharaoh awoke. Question, what is a kine? Somebody is not a rancher in here. What is a kine? You didn't hear that. Yeah, a kine here is cattle. I don't know where that comes from exactly, but I had to kind of look that up myself. Okay, let me say that again for those that are at home and the system's running here. The question has come up, how long was Joseph in prison? Michael brings up a very good point, that he was 17, we know, when he was thrown into the well and dragged down to Egypt. And now we're going to find out he's 30 in this lesson. So there's some math there. We don't know how long he was at Potiphar's house exactly and how long he's in prison. But we would say it's quite many of his formative years, at least. He's there in this situation. And not once thrown into the well, not twice being betrayed by Potiphar's wife. He was in the seat of luxury. Not 3 times. The baker forgets to mention him to Pharaoh. He doesn't lose faith. So it came to pass in the morning, 7 good years, and I told this unto the magicians. Here we go. And there was none to declare it to me. So Pharaoh is going to his sorcerers. They're called magicians here. And we see those where else in the Bible coming up? These magicians, these sorcerers. I think I hear Exodus. I think I hear Moses. Yeah, so this is quite common. It's coming to my mind now, too. We're going to probably talk about this later on in the lesson. I forget if I mentioned this, so I'm going to say it again. I'm going to say it here first. Remember, this term Pharaoh is like the term Caesar, is like the term president. It represents many different people. In the case of Caesar, it represents different families. And in this case, This Pharaoh represents a group of people, the Hygarths or something like that, I remember reading, that are going to be totally different than the ones that do not know Joseph later on, this other group that's coming in. But one thing they do have in common is they rely on gods with a small g, and they rely on interpreters to translate for these gods with a small g. That doesn't happen today, though, does it? We can't see any application or parallel there, do we? Well, I disagree with you. I watch TV and I see it all the time on the religious channels. As Michael knows, is one of my favorite places to stop. There are people there that interpret dreams today. They don't always match up with what I read in the Bible. So here we see these magicians. They can't interpret for Pharaoh. Then the chief butler said unto Pharaoh, I remember my faults to this day. I forgot something. I forgot to mention something very important. Where was the baker?
He's in prison.
He's in prison or he's gone. He met his demise. And the backstory there is maybe this baker was trying to poison the Pharaoh. We don't know exactly why. But the butler has a VH moment. He hits himself on the forehead. So I forgot to mention why I'm really here. Yeah, really, it's really why I'm here with you right now. There was a day when a young man, a Hebrew, remember a Hebrew, what's that slang for in this culture? It's gypsy. Or you might say this gypsy, servant to the captain of the guard. We told him our dreams, and each of us, he interpreted that. And this is how I've been restored to my office, and the baker was hanged. So this is what this butler says. Kind of gets us into a good situation for Joseph. So they bring up Joseph. And he says, it's not good for me to do anything but answer the Pharaoh's prayer in peace. So he gets in front of the Pharaoh and he starts to interpret. 9 ears devoured 7 good ears. I told this to the magicians, but none would declare it to me, Pharaoh says. Joseph said to the Pharaoh, the dream of the Pharaoh is one. Who showed it to him? God hath shown it to me with a big G. So there's some preeminence right there. Your gods, your magicians, I speak for the true and living God. And we're going to see Pharaoh recognizes this pretty quick. So Joseph gets credit, and that's going to be really good for him. 7 gods are the 7 good kine or cattle, represent 7 years of good times. So the story goes on, skipping ahead here a little bit. He tells him this dream, interprets it for him, and notice what the Pharaoh recognizes right away. I'm going to set you over all the land of Egypt. Right there, he gets a promotion, doesn't he? Out of prison and the second in command. Here I go, I did remember this. 2 tribes ruled Egypt for a time, the Hyksos, and they were thought to come in from foreign lands. And this is the Pharaoh that likely gave power to the Hebrews, or specifically this Joseph. So there was some kind of struggle here. Historians could probably fill us into that this group of people came in. The next set of pharaohs, not so much. So Pharaoh took off his ring from his hand and put it on Joseph's hand, arrayed him with vestures of fine linen, and put a gold chain about his neck. Or we might say today, he got some bling. Get that? For our young people who might be watching. The only thing he didn't get was the gold tooth, as far as I can tell. But he got some bling running there. And he made him ride to a second chariot, so he's right behind Pharaoh when they rode around. So everybody gets to see who this Joseph was. They made him bow a knee to this Hebrew, this gypsy, and made him rule all over the land of Egypt. And then Joseph called his name Zethaphaneah, and I can't say it any better than John. And he gave him to a wife, Essetha, the daughter of Potiphar, priest of On. And Joseph went out all over the land of Egypt. Now, I think in your commentary, there's some background about this woman that Joseph was given to as a wife that might have been eventually the first convert from a Gentile to a Hebrew. And here Michael rightly points out in 41:46, Joseph was 30 years old. So again, we're told the age of Joseph when he arrives to this position, which really will carry him out through the end of Genesis. And Pharaoh did this and let him appoint officers over the land, take up a fifth of the land of Egypt in 7 plenteous years. So Joseph not only interprets his dream, but now Pharaoh is asking him to act on it. We see Jesus make a similar story about this. Anybody remember what that is? The man that stores up what he's been given, good steward of what he's been given, all these kind of lessons Jesus will talk about too for applications in the future. And so the 7 plenteous years, the earth brought forth by handfuls. Of course, we would think that Jesus is blessing this group of people because of Joseph. And so another application comes to my mind that as Christians, we can bless those around us by how we conduct ourselves, how we comport ourselves, examples that we can unknowingly give to others. Joseph gathered corn as the sand of the sea, so very much they couldn't keep track of it all, and put it in storehouses. And then we go back and visit these sons that Joseph bore from the daughter of Potiphar. And Joseph called the firstborn Manasseh, for he said that he made me forget all my toil. And we just covered some of that toil a minute ago. And so here we see Joseph now, somewhere around 30 years old, has a child, calls him Manasseh, and this child makes him forget about all his troubles and toils. Certainly all of us that are mothers and fathers can definitely relate to that. And grandchildren give you a whole new perspective on life. What is important, what's not so important, what do you think is important, is not so important. Kitchen floor that's not clean is not so important anymore. House full of toys when you like to keep things straightened up, not so important anymore. But when they smile and they laugh, they tell you they love you, there's nothing more important than that. And though all this has happened, I would think Joseph now reflects on who has blessed him. And if you're not a believer in God, if you're around when that first baby's born, you become a believer. God's made me forget all my toils. Now he has a second child, Ephraim, for God has caused me to be fruitful in the land of my affliction. These two names, these two tribes are going to come up again and again in the Old Testament. And in Genesis 41:53, there was 7 years of plenteous that was in the land of Egypt were ended. Now we have a mathematical scholar here, Michael. What does that 7 mean? The interpretation of the dream was correct. That's one point. In my mind, 7 is also a complete number. He's not going to let me go there. But 7 plenty. God gave them everything they needed, and it fulfilled Joseph's needs also. Notice here the king, as we just looked at, Pharaoh crowned him liberally. And he also kind of naturalized him by providing him a wife here. And he lets him marry the daughter of the priest. And so they, even though they worship many gods, one I read was the sun god Ra, but the center of their gods was On, which he marries the daughter, or he was also called Heliphus by the Greeks. So the Greeks go on to worship some of these same gods. Joseph takes on precedence by all these Egyptian priests also. You notice here that he's given the wife of a priest because he can interpret these dreams better than them. He's been given precedence not only over the storehouses, but over, I think, Pharaoh's dreams. He becomes Pharaoh's right-hand man. He's the one whisper in his ear. So he displaces these priests in their gods. And that's something we can look over, looking through here real quick. But it's significant. Joseph is naturalized. He's given an Egyptian wife, and he's also given the right ear of Pharaoh. He's the right-hand man, we might say. He sits at a seat in a high place. He becomes very influential. But he marries into an idolatrous family, really. Here we have a story where his wives are certainly worshiping false gods, false idols. And we're going to see some of that. He must have influenced her too, because we see later on she becomes a Hebrew. So when all the land was famished, the people cried out to Pharaoh for bread. And that would be a euphemism for the wheat and all that they stored. And the Pharaoh said, go see my right-hand man, Joseph. Famine was all over the face of the earth. Now, again, significantly, we're talking about the land of Canaan, where Jacob and his sons are. So this famine is going out not only in Egypt, which is kind of unusual for Egypt to have one. Not so unusual for us to see Canaan hit with a famine. We're going to see that many times in Jerusalem and all these areas. So Joseph opens up the storehouses and he sells to the Egyptians. He doesn't just give it away, he sells it to them as they were sore for food. And so Jacob saw there was corn in Egypt. Uh-oh, Jacob. And he said to his sons, why do you look at each other here? We're not going to be able to do anything. That's why he said, why do you look upon one another? Why are you looking at yourselves for this? We're going to have to go to Egypt.
So how big was the land of Egypt? You don't have a map to show. So supply every grain in or whatever they had back then to store all this in.
Mm-hmm. How big was the area of Egypt? And you're right, I should have brought a map of that. But I can think of it in my mind. It was south of Canaan, and the most fertile area was there where the Nile running north emptied into the sea, and that area might be likened to what we'd say Florida or something, real nice and fertile. And then it ran down further south. The kings buried their pretty good size area, but mainly the Nile running north, largest river in the world running north, I believe, fed the area. Good question. So even though it was fair, there was apparently there was even famine there, but Joseph, as a good steward might do, stored up for winter. One of the hobbies I have at home is burning wood. I've got a wood burning stove, and I love that heat. And what I try to do is cut my wood stored up during the summer when it's nice outside. I like being outside. I like to get the fresh air. It's a nice hobby. If I can get somebody to come over and help me, I'm always up for that too. It's a good way to. Of course, I did that with my sons, try to talk them. They did real well for themselves, and they're doing real well, but they don't want to see me anymore with wood. I don't want to see any kind of stove or anything. But, when we think of applications, certainly one is that I look around now, I got neighbors, they burn wood too. They're down out in the back over the hill in this terrible weather, and you can hear chainsaws going and trucks moving around trying to cover the muddy hills, and I think, why are you doing that now? And so whenever I get a chance, recently Tommy's helped me with that, Michael helped me in the past, I get some more wood. But Pharaoh could see the Spirit of God. Big S, big G. And this Pharaoh could see God working in the life of Joseph, and he became a benefit of that, which works into our next hour too, this whole idea of what we do for evangelizing the lost is often just how we conduct ourselves, where we give the glory to, in all things that we do. and that we do the word, just not hear it. Somehow Joseph knew from God that he should store up, save up, and get ready for this famine. God told him this interpretation of the dream. God told him what was coming. And how much can we see in the future by reading our Bibles? How much can we see from the history of the world that we can see what could be coming in our lives? Okay, Gene, get ready. What two items were in the dreams of the butler and the baker? What two items? Okay, advice. Is that what you said? There was a vine. There was a vine before me and a basket in the manner of baked meats. Whom did Joseph acknowledge as taking credit for the interpretation of dreams? Genesis 41:16. Who did he acknowledge as the interpreter? I spelled dreams wrong. Why do I always catch these things when I'm up here in front of everybody? It's not drams, it's dreams. That's right. It's not for me. God shall give Pharaoh an answer of peace. What qualities did Pharaoh find in Joseph? Genesis 41:33. What qualities? Thank you. He was discreet and wise. See how we missed that? If I didn't ask you that question, we're on right past that. Discreet and wise. Wouldn't that be wonderful? That was said about us. Discreet and wise. Proud to say my daughter got a new position this week. She is now going to be able to use her license and be a healthcare administrator. At her age, that's phenomenal. Out in Topeka, 110 bed facility. She said her office is going to be as big as our dining room. You're going to need room for all the problems, I guarantee you that. She's going to get an assistant. She's so happy, and we're so proud of her. Took a lot of hard work. And I wanted her to come here today and celebrate, but she's, of course, very busy with everything. But in the course of all that, there was a lot of knives out there for her. She's young, and a lot of, in the job she's having, works out in Easton right now. Don't tell them. Tell your boss, give notice, don't tell everybody else. I don't know if she followed through on that. Be discreet. Where do we get wisdom? Get wisdom from God, don't we? Study our Bibles, I hear. And prayer. And if you're like me, listen to your dreams. Some of the best. I was telling my mother last night, some of the best ideas I get to is when I'm sleeping, and somehow, I'm not saying I hear voices yet, but I truly believe if you're trying to work into the Bible and not claiming I'm the best at it, good things can be told to you in a dream. I haven't figured out Patty's yet, still working on that, but some of mine sort of make sense. It's funny. I don't know if anybody else wants to tell you their dreams, but Patty loves to tell me her dreams. What was good in the eyes of Pharaoh? Genesis 41:37. This one's sort of a hard one. I looked at this one. Doesn't really say at 41:37 in my opinion, but if you read through there, seems like the dream was really what was good in the eyes of Pharaoh. And then I'm sure he heard that too, yeah. Gene says, and he acknowledged God, his God. Remember, there are many gods here. And that hasn't changed today, has it? There are many gods out there, but there's only one true and living God. And we should acknowledge him every chance we get. What did Pharaoh say was in Joseph? Exactly. Very good. Gene says in Genesis 41:38, Pharaoh said unto his servants, can we find such a one as this, a man whom the Spirit of God is? Wouldn't that be wonderful that was said about any one of us?
Well, I'm not bragging, but that holds true a lot in my profession that I'm in. I go into all kinds of bad language and stuff. But I was very well respected at the jails and everything because I didn't allow that. And that was never, the language was always a bad one.
Yep.
So it does tell who you are.
Absolutely. Gene, just to repeat it for those that might not hear it at home, Gene makes a good point. One of the areas is in our language. And I try to do the same thing in my area. After a while, people won't say those foul words. And we can argue about how bad that is, but it lends the idea of being discreet. We don't have to tell everybody that everything is on our minds. And we don't have to throw in with that kind of group that wants to talk like that. And pretty soon they won't talk like that around you. And especially, and I've been in a situation before, is I'd appreciate if you don't say that.
I don't respect that.
Mm-hmm.
Most of the time they don't apologize.
Yep. Don't respect that kind of language. People, the way you act, how you show love, how you don't react to behavior that might seem to be against you. I think that's another thing Pharaoh might have recognized. Certainly after all this acknowledgement that he gave Joseph, he gave him his signet ring, he gave him the gold chain, a bling. He must have looked into his background and recognized that this man has something special within his character. And so there's several ways as we think about applications that we could also emulate Joseph in our lives. There's certainly, and we're going to look at that in the second hour as I have the opportunity to talk again. When we talk about reaching out to lost souls, and certainly Pharaoh, the wife that he gave him was influenced by this. The road's not easy, but we never give up. Pharaoh said unto Joseph, for as much as God has showed thee in all this, there's none so discreet and wise as thou art. Wow, that's quite enough to be said about somebody. Once again, what did Pharaoh give Joseph in Genesis 41, 42, and 45? Gave him a ring. Gave him a vesture of fine clothes, the gold chain. He gave him some bling. And Pharaoh called Joseph's name John. Zephaniah. Anybody got a pronunciation on that? I should have looked that one up. And gave him a wife. Remember, it kind of naturalized him this way. That's what people can do, is they marry someone from the United States and then get naturalized. And not only did he give him any daughter, but he gave him a daughter of a priest, one of the high priests in their thinking, their religion. How old was Joseph when he was promoted? Genesis 41:46. Yep, gave you the answer already. 30 years old. Where did Joseph store the grain he collected? That's right. And in every city, we don't know exactly where in these cities. There was some kind of, I would imagine, storehouse. You had to keep things covered. What were the name of Joseph's two sons? Ephraim and Manasseh. Second son, Ephraim, because he caused me to be fruitful in the land. Manasseh, because he made me forget all my toils and troubles. Who came, or what came to Joseph to buy grain? I don't know if that's a what or a who. Yeah, all the countries came to Egypt, to Joseph, for to buy corn, because the famine was so sore, or so troubling in all the lands. All right, that's it. The lesson is yours. Pretty straightforward lesson.
Okay, I want you to answer.
Any questions? Discussion question number 2, Jean is asking to answer here. Let's see what that is. What can we learn about Joseph from the way he named his children? Is that the discussion question? Okay, that's a good one. What can we learn about Joseph, the way he named his children? Anybody have some ideas there? He was praising God, Tommy says. He's acknowledging God again with his gifts. And it gets pretty specific. Not only was he praising God, he's praising God for letting him forget all his toils, right? And troubles, as we saw back here. And he caused him to be fruitful. Okay, any other questions? Study every day this week. We've got a guest teacher next week. Guest teacher for lesson 10. Much better looking than me. Does a much better job, I'm sure. And he's going to talk about Joseph and his brothers. So see, everything I've done today is just kind of laid the groundwork for Jared next week. Got to be excited about that lesson. So take a good look at Genesis chapter 40, 1 through 24. Thank you all for your help, your attendance, your ideas. Thank you.